Radical control discipline begins with a ruthless distinction. What is yours and what is not? Most anxiety is not born from events themselves, but from an unconscious attempt to dominate what was never placed under your authority. You attempt to manage perception, forecast outcomes, guarantee approval, secure permanence. You attempt to architect the uncontrollable. The cure is not comfort. The cure is jurisdiction. You possess authority over judgment, intention, effort, and conduct. You do not possess authority over timing, recognition, reaction, or result. Yet anxiety thrives in the gap between those domains. It whispers that you must secure the outcome before you act, that you must predict the future before you move, that you must be certain before you begin. From speculation to execution, the undisciplined mind negotiates with externals. It bargains for reassurance. It scans for validation. It seeks guarantees. This posture weakens resolve because it makes your emotional state dependent on unstable variables. Trends dissolve. If your equilibrium relies on these, your stability is permanently fragile. It relocates your center of gravity inward. You anticipate criticism. You fear dismissal. But perception lives in other minds, and other minds are territories you will never occupy. To attempt governance there is to abandon governance here. Discipline requires withdrawal from that invasion. The same principle applies to outcomes. You prepare, strategize, execute, yet the result remains influenced by variables beyond your command. Weather. When you equate worth with outcome, you surrender power to probability. Radical control discipline detaches identity from result and binds it instead to effort. Effort is sovereign. Conduct is sovereign. Intention is sovereign. The scoreboard is not. This shift is not passive. It is intensely active. It demands vigilance. When anxiety rises, interrogate it. Ask, what am I trying to control right now that does not belong to me? The answer often reveals hidden attachments, approval, certainty, comfort, dominance. Once identified, these attachments lose their authority. You return to what is actionable. You refine your preparation. You sharpen your focus. You elevate your execution. There is a psychological liberation in narrowing your sphere of responsibility. Your task is clarity in thought, excellence in effort, alignment in behavior. Everything else is weather. Weather is not negotiated with and is navigated. Radical control discipline also requires emotional austerity. Not suppression, but filtration. Feelings arise automatically. Endorsement is optional. Anxiety often begins as sensation tightness in the chest, accelerated pulse, restless anticipation. The undisciplined mind interprets sensation as threat. The disciplined mind pauses before assigning meaning. Sensation becomes data, not prophecy. This separation prevents escalation. External validation is another arena of misplaced control. Praise intoxicates, criticism destabilizes. Both become addictive when identity depends on them. Radical control discipline trains indifference to applause and immunity to insult. Not through arrogance, but through internal metrics. You evaluate yourself by standards chosen deliberately. Honesty, competence, diligence, restraint. When these standards are met, peace follows. When they are not, correction follows. Public reaction becomes background noise rather than command. The marketplace of attention amplifies anxiety by rewarding comparison. You measure progress against curated illusions. You compare beginnings to someone else's culmination. Comparison is a subtle surrender of control because it bases self-worth on external trajectories. Discipline redirects comparison inward. Are you sharper than yesterday? More focused than last month? More composed than before? Growth becomes personal, measurable, sovereign. This philosophy does not deny ambition. It purifies it. Ambition without discipline chases applause. Ambition with discipline pursues mastery. Mastery is internal. It is refinement of craft, precision of thought, consistency of effort. Whether recognition follows is incidental. When ambition is anchored in controllables, anxiety diminishes because the objective is always within reach. Improve the process. Even uncertainty becomes manageable under this framework. You cannot control the unknown, but you can control preparation. You cannot guarantee safety, but you can cultivate resilience. You cannot eliminate risk, but you can strengthen capability. Preparedness replaces paranoia. Training replaces trembling. Focus replaces forecasting. Radical control discipline also restructures decision-making. Instead of asking, "What if this fails?" you ask, "Is this aligned with my principles? And have I given it my best effort?" Anxiety weakens because the stakes shift from outcome to integrity. The future loses its tyrannical presence when you confine your labor to the present interval. This hour contains sufficient responsibility. This conversation contains sufficient responsibility. This task contains sufficient responsibility. Expanding beyond that boundary invites speculation. Contraction restores power. The discipline is radical because it contradicts instinct. Instinct seeks security in prediction. Discipline finds security in character. Discipline finds relief in action. Instinct seeks control over others. Discipline governs the self. Over time, this practice forges psychological durability. You no longer panic at volatility because volatility was never under your jurisdiction. You no longer crumble under criticism because perception was never your possession. You no longer freeze before uncertainty because uncertainty was never promised to you as conquerable territory. Anxiety loses its dominance not through avoidance, but through reassignment of authority. The mind becomes orderly when it stops trespassing. Energy once wasted on speculation becomes fuel for performance. Emotional turbulence settles when you refuse to empower it with exaggerated narratives. What remains is clarity. What remains is deliberate action. What remains is self-command exercised in every measurable decision, independent of applause, immune to unpredictability, rooted entirely in the disciplined governance of what is truly yours. It is the deliberate refusal to let intrusive thoughts govern perception, emotion, or behavior. Most people do not suffer from reality itself. Unexamined, a single assumption, repeated without scrutiny, becomes a belief. A belief, reinforced by fear, becomes identity. Anxiety feeds on this unchallenged architecture. Sovereignty begins the moment you recognize that not every thought deserves authority. The mind generates impressions constantly. Some are rational, many are distorted. Yet the undisciplined thinker treats each mental whisper as credible. A mistake becomes catastrophe. Uncertainty becomes impending collapse. The narrative escalates automatically. Ask, is this thought verifiable? Is it constructive? Is it aligned with evidence, or is it fueled by projection? This pause is not hesitation, it is command. You are not required to obey the first draft of your mind. Intrusive thoughts often masquerade as protective instincts. They claim to prepare you for danger. In truth, they rehearse humiliation, amplify worst-case scenarios, and exhaust your emotional reserves before any event occurs. Sovereignty requires discernment. Preparation is strategic. Rumination is corrosive. One sharpens capacity. The other, a challenge, is framed as irreversible failure. A conversation is framed as reputational ruin. A setback is framed as permanent decline. Cognitive sovereignty dismantles exaggeration by demanding proportion. What is the actual scale of this issue? What evidence confirms its severity? What alternatives exist beyond the dramatic storyline? Most fears shrink under factual light. Language inside the mind shapes emotional intensity. Replace absolutist phrases, always, never, ruined, impossible, with precise description. Precision stabilizes perception. Instead of everything is falling apart, state, this project is delayed. Sovereignty also requires awareness of cognitive distortions. Catastrophizing, mind reading, personalization, overgeneralization. These patterns operate automatically when unobserved. The mind assumes it knows what others think. It interprets neutral expressions as judgment. It extends one negative outcome into a lifelong pattern. Recognizing these distortions reduces their authority. They lose influence when exposed. Attention is currency. Anxiety hijacks attention and anchors it to threat. Sovereignty reclaims focus intentionally. Direct it toward task execution, skill refinement, physical movement, constructive dialogue. It is strategic allocation of cognitive resources. You decide what deserves amplification. Emotional intensity does not validate thought accuracy. A belief can feel urgent and still be false. Anxiety often equates intensity with truth. Sovereignty separates feeling from fact. You can acknowledge discomfort without endorsing the narrative attached to it. I feel uneasy is different from something terrible is about to happen. The first is sensation. The second is speculation. Mental resilience develops through repetition of this filtering process. Each time you refuse to indulge catastrophic imagery, you weaken its habitual dominance. The brain adapts to patterns. Sovereignty establishes. Observing others' achievements without context creates distorted self-assessment. Social visibility rarely reveals struggle, doubt, or preparation. Yet the mind constructs a hierarchy and places itself at a deficit. Sovereignty interrupts comparison by returning evaluation to personal metrics. Growth becomes longitudinal, not competitive. Improvement is measured against your own prior state. Memory also distorts perception. Anxiety selectively curates evidence to support insecurity. Sovereignty corrects the imbalance by cataloging competence as deliberately as mistakes. Recall instances of resilience, adaptability, problem-solving. Evidence of strength is as factual as evidence of error. Silence is an underused instrument of sovereignty. When anxiety escalates, the instinct is to seek reassurance or distraction. Instead, cultivate stillness. Observe the thought without reacting. Watch its intensity rise and fall. Thoughts are transient phenomena, not permanent fixtures. Their impermanence becomes visible when you refrain from immediate engagement. Breathing patterns influence cognitive clarity. Rapid, shallow breathing reinforces urgency. Slow, controlled breathing signals safety to the nervous system. This physiological shift reduces the emotional charge surrounding intrusive thoughts. Sovereignty integrates body and mind, recognizing that cognitive authority is strengthened when biological stress is regulated. Information consumption also affects mental autonomy. Continuous exposure to alarming headlines, sensational narratives, and polarized commentary amplifies perceived threat. Sovereignty includes selective intake, curate sources, limit exposure to volatility, protect cognitive bandwidth as deliberately as financial capital. Identity plays a critical role. If you label yourself as anxious, fragile, or overwhelmed, the mind conforms to that narrative. Sovereignty reframes identity around capability and adaptability. You experience anxiety. You are not defined by it. Language influences self-concept. Self-concept influences performance. Discipline of thought does not eliminate uncertainty. It refines response to it. Instead of spiraling into hypothetical disaster, you ask practical questions. What action is available? What preparation is possible? Action replaces abstraction. Specificity replaces vagueness. Cognitive sovereignty also involves forgiveness toward oneself. Perfectionism fuels intrusive thinking by equating minor flaws with personal inadequacy. Accept that error is inevitable within growth. Analyze mistakes for instruction, not condemnation. Self-critique should refine skill, not erode confidence. Repetition solidifies authority. The first attempt to challenge a thought feels artificial. The 10th feels deliberate. The 100th becomes instinctive. Mental discipline mirrors physical training. Consistency yields strength. Each moment of conscious reframing reinforces. Autonomy. Your mind is an instrument. Untrained, it reacts impulsively to every stimulus. Trained, it evaluates before responding. Sovereignty is not suppression of thought, but governance of interpretation. It is the capacity to experience emotion. It is the practiced ability to step outside narrative and assess it objectively. Anxiety loses influence when stripped of exaggeration, deprived of unchecked repetition, and confronted with evidence. The mind becomes an ally. Present moment dominance is the practice of reclaiming time from speculative fear. Anxiety thrives in the future, an imagined landscape where possibilities multiply and worst-case scenarios parade as certainties. The present moment contains no such distortions. Dominance begins by recognizing that life is experienced only now. Yesterday is memory. Tomorrow is projection. Strategic focus redirects attention from hypothetical outcomes to tangible tasks. When the mind drifts toward uncertainty, guide it back to the sphere of action. What decision advances progress? What detail requires care? The mind believes. In reality, excessive mental rehearsal exhausts emotional resources without improving capability. True preparation is behavioral. It involves skill development, planning, and rehearsal. Of actions, not catastrophic imagination. If a presentation is forthcoming, prepare content, practice delivery, and anticipate reasonable questions. Do not dwell on visions of humiliation. Composure. Do not fabricate narratives about rejection before dialogue occurs. Intentional breathing anchors awareness in the present. Slow, deliberate breathing communicates safety and stabilizes emotional state. Inhale deeply, count rhythmically, and exhale fully. This simple act interrupts physiological escalation. It creates space between stimulus and reaction. Within that space, choice emerges. You are not compelled to react impulsively to every sensation. You can observe, evaluate, and decide. Breathing is a bridge between body and mind, a tool for restoring equilibrium when thoughts become turbulent. Each fragment competes for mental space. Not all deserve occupancy. That amplifies anxiety. Prioritize information that informs or enriches. Silence unnecessary digital noise. Attention is finite. Where it flows, growth follows. If it flows toward distress, distress expands. If it flows toward constructive engagement, capability expands. Decisive action transforms perception. Anxiety often paralyzes because it exaggerates risk. The antidote is movement. Action does not require perfection. It requires initiation. A small step is sufficient. Send the email. Make the phone call. Complete the first segment. Momentum reduces psychological resistance. Once engaged, the mind shifts from fear to problem solving. Problems are manageable when approached incrementally. They become overwhelming only when imagined in totality. Present dominance also involves acceptance of uncertainty. Human life is inherently unpredictable. No strategy guarantees flawless outcomes. Attempts to eliminate uncertainty create additional anxiety because they pursue impossibility. The alternative is tolerance. You can plan responsibly while acknowledging that variables beyond control exist. This acknowledgement is not defeat. It is realism. Confidence does not depend on certainty. It depends on competence and adaptability. When circumstances change, capable individuals adjust. Emotional states fluctuate. Dominance does not demand constant positivity. It demands response discipline. You are not required to suppress emotion. You are required to refrain from letting emotion dictate behavior. Feel the sensation. Observe it. Name it if helpful. Then proceed with action aligned to values and objectives. Emotional awareness without obedience preserves autonomy. Time perception influences anxiety. The mind stretches negative experiences, making them appear endless. A difficult meeting feels interminable before it begins. A stressful period seems permanent. Present dominance corrects this distortion. Time passes. Moments end. Experiences evolve. What feels unmanageable today may feel distant tomorrow. This perspective reduces urgency and restores proportion. Strategic focus requires prioritization. Not every task demands equal attention. Identify high-impact activities and allocate energy accordingly. Peripheral concerns can wait. Perfection in minor details is less valuable than progress in essential areas. Focus is a force multiplier. Concentrated effort produces results faster than scattered activity. When anxiety tempts distraction, return to priorities. It also reinforces present awareness by engaging the body. Walking, stretching, or brief activity interrupts cognitive loops. The rhythm of movement grounds attention in sensory experience. Breath, muscle, and environment become focal points. This shift diminishes mental chatter. Language shapes perception. Replace vague catastrophes with precise descriptions. Instead of everything is falling apart, identify specifics. This project requires revision. Instead of "I will fail," state "I will attempt and improve." Precision reduces emotional amplification. It frames challenges as solvable rather than terminal. Words influence thought. Present dominance also involves gratitude. Anxiety narrows focus to deficiencies and threats. Gratitude expands awareness to include resources and positives. Acknowledging what functions well: health, relationships, opportunities, balances perception. It does not deny difficulty. It contextualizes it. Life contains both hardship and value. Recognizing value fosters resilience. Sleep and rest effect. Cognitive clarity. Fatigue magnifies emotional sensitivity and reduces problem-solving capacity. Prioritize restorative habits. Consistent sleep, hydration, and nutrition support mental stability. Present dominance is easier when the body is regulated. Self-care is not indulgence. It is maintenance. Comparison undermines presence. Social platforms display highlights, not complete narratives. Present dominance redirects attention inward. Measure progress against personal benchmarks. Growth is individual. Your journey is not identical to anyone else's. Comparison breeds dissatisfaction. Self-improvement breeds fulfillment. Indecision prolongs uncertainty. Choose courses of action and commit. Decisions can be revised if necessary. Indecision immobilizes. Action creates feedback. Feedback enables adjustment. Movement is superior to stagnation. Mindfulness enhances. Awareness. Observe thoughts without attachment. They appear, change shape, and disappear. This perspective prevents identification with every mental event. Thoughts are data, not destiny. Is practiced, not perfected. Moments of anxiety will occur. The objective is response improvement. Grand achievements are built from small actions repeated consistently. Dominance of the present enables those actions. It transforms time from an adversary into a resource. Each moment becomes an opportunity to choose wisely, act deliberately, and progress. Master it, and the future becomes a consequence of disciplined action rather than a source of dread. External advantages, wealth, recognition, convenience are unstable. Internal virtues, integrity, discipline, courage, and restraint remain within personal jurisdiction. Power derived from virtue does not depend on applause or validation. It depends on alignment between action and principle. When behavior reflects values, confidence becomes organic. Anxiety diminishes because self-worth is anchored in conduct rather than external judgment. Character is measurable through decisions. Small choices reveal internal priorities. Honesty in minor matters builds credibility in significant ones. Keeping commitments strengthens trust in oneself. Resisting shortcuts cultivates long-term competence. When faced with opportunity to shift blame, accept responsibility. These actions reinforce psychological stability because they align identity with truth. A person who acts with integrity requires no elaborate defense of self-image. Facts speak for themselves. Discipline is the engine of virtue. Talent without discipline produces inconsistency. Discipline transforms potential into performance. It involves routine effort, even when motivation fluctuates. Professional excellence and personal growth. Practicing skills, reviewing errors, and refining technique create mastery. Anxiety often arises from perceived inadequacy. Discipline addresses inadequacy by generating competence. Competence reduces fear because capability replaces helplessness. Courage complements discipline. Courage is not absence of fear. It is action despite fear. Avoidance amplifies anxiety. Facing difficulty diminishes its psychological weight. A complex task once begun reveals incremental solutions. Courage converts obstacles into opportunities for growth. Over time, what once seemed daunting becomes routine. This progression demonstrates that strength is cultivated, not granted. Restraint is another dimension of virtue-centered power. Modern environments encourage excess consumption, excess reaction, excess comparison. It involves deliberate moderation. Emotional restraint prevents impulsive decisions. Financial restraint fosters security. Digital restraint protects attention. Not every stimulus requires response. Not every desire requires fulfillment. By exercising restraint, individuals reclaim autonomy. They choose actions rather than submit to impulses. Autonomy reduces anxiety because life becomes a series of conscious decisions rather than automatic reactions. Virtue-centered power also values service. Contributing to others creates meaning. Mentoring a peer or offering empathy. Service shifts focus outward. Anxiety often intensifies when attention remains inward. Helping others disrupts that cycle. It demonstrates capability and compassion. These qualities strengthen self-perception. A person who contributes meaningfully feels purposeful. Purpose counters existential uncertainty. Authenticity is essential. Virtue is incompatible with deception. Presenting a false image requires constant maintenance. It generates cognitive. Authenticity resolves that tension. Speaking truthfully and acknowledging limitations fosters trust. Trust from others is valuable, but self-trust is indispensable. When individuals trust their own judgment, decision-making becomes clearer. Anxiety decreases because internal consistency replaces uncertainty. Virtue-centered power also involves. Mistakes are inevitable. Virtue does not demand perfection. It demands accountability and improvement. When errors occur, analyze them objectively. Identify contributing factors. Implement corrective measures. This process transforms failure into instruction. Growth emerges from reflection. Over time, patterns of improvement replace patterns of repetition. The individual becomes stronger through experience. External success often reflects internal virtue. Reliable effort produces opportunities. Ethical behavior builds reputation. Skill development creates value. However, external outcomes remain secondary. Virtue-centered power prioritizes process over results. Results fluctuate. Process endures. A project may succeed or fail, but disciplined effort remains commendable. This perspective reduces anxiety associated with performance. Worth is not determined by outcome. Worth is determined by conduct. Virtue also fosters resilience. Life contains adversity, loss, disappointment, and uncertainty. Resilience enables recovery. It involves emotional regulation and perspective. Challenges are temporary. Human capacity for adaptation is remarkable. History demonstrates that individuals and societies overcome hardship. Recognizing this truth reduces despair. Difficult periods become chapters rather than conclusions. Resilience transforms suffering into strength. Power derived from virtue is quiet but profound. It does not require dominance over others. It requires mastery of self. Self-mastery influences every domain: relationships, work, and personal development. A disciplined individual communicates effectively, collaborates productively, and navigates conflict with composure. These abilities generate respect. Respect earned through virtue is more durable than admiration obtained through spectacle. Virtue-centered power aligns with long-term thinking. Such choices often carry hidden costs, damaged relationships, diminished credibility, or internal regret. Long-term thinking evaluates consequences beyond immediate benefit. It prioritizes sustainability. Ethical decisions may require patience, but they preserve integrity. Integrity is invaluable because it underpins trust and self-respect. Attention to detail reflects virtue. Quality matters. Completing tasks thoroughly demonstrates respect for work and others. Sloppiness erodes confidence. Excellence builds it. Attention to detail does not require perfectionism. It requires care. Small improvements accumulate. Over time, they produce significant results. Virtue-centered power recognizes that greatness emerges from consistent quality. Humility complements strength. Humility acknowledges limits and values learning. It resists arrogance. Arrogance isolates individuals by dismissing feedback. Humility invites growth by accepting instruction. A virtuous person remains open to improvement. Knowledge evolves. Skills deepen. Perspective expands. Humility ensures that power remains grounded in reality. Virtue-centered power ultimately creates stability. External conditions change. Markets fluctuate. Opinions shift. Circumstances evolve. Internal virtues remain constant. They provide a foundation for decision-making and emotional balance. Anxiety diminishes because identity is secure. Worth is not contingent on external validation. It is defined by character. This philosophy encourages purposeful living. Actions reflect values. Values guide decisions. Decisions shape outcomes. Purpose emerges from alignment between belief and behavior. A purposeful life reduces existential uncertainty. It provides direction. Direction fosters motivation. Motivation sustains effort. Effort generates progress. Virtue-centered power is accessible to everyone. It requires no extraordinary resources. It requires commitment. Commitment to honesty, discipline, courage, and service. These principles are universal. They transcend circumstance. Individuals who embrace them cultivate strength that external events cannot diminish. Power rooted in virtue is enduring. It adapts to change without compromise. It prioritizes meaning over approval. It values growth over complacency. It transforms challenges into opportunities. Ultimately, it enables individuals to live with purpose and integrity, creating lives defined not by external validation, but by internal excellence.